let me welcome our President and CEO, Jim Heppelmann, to the platform.
Good morning. Good morning, Ron. Good morning, Mark. Well, it's my great pleasure to be here again with you this morning. One more time, in front of a couple of thousand people live, and numerous more joining us virtually over the internet. It's really a great forum, I think, to engage with our customers and customers to engage each other and really sort of advance the state of our mutual thinking, if you will. So you might have noticed as you came in this morning, our new tagline. These words, product and service advantage. And these are words that speak aspirationally to what we hope you get when you engage with PTC. This is what you take away, we hope, from an engagement with PTC. And behind this tagline is a mission statement that talks about how we think we can help you gain product and service advantage. And that is by providing technology solutions, both technology and the consulting around it, that help you transform the way that your products are created and serviced. And if we do this, we can help you create product and service advantage. So this word transform, you're going to hear a lot today and a lot, I think, throughout the conference, because it really speaks to the type of changes that we want to help customers achieve when they work with us. And so to explain this strategy, this mission statement, and some of the strategies behind it, I'd like to take you on a brief tour through history, referring back to a name I've shared here before of one of the people that I think is one of the most transformational figures really in our industry ever. And that is Eli Whitney. So I want to tell a little story here about all the different transformational impact he had and how it affects our thinking even today. So Eli Whitney was born in 1765 in Westborough, Massachusetts, not far from PTC's headquarters. And he grew up and ultimately attended Yale, graduated from Yale at age 27, and he traveled down to the South, the agricultural South at the time, to take on a teaching job. And when he got there, down in Georgia, he found out that because the economy was difficult, they had decided to cut his pay in half. They could only pay him 50% of what they had promised to him. So of course he was pretty disappointed, and he said, I don't want the job. I'll go back to the north. But for a while he hung out at the plantation of a friend he had met in Georgia. And while he was there, he was listening to some of the local farmers complain about the fact that the economy was bad because they had no cash crops to sell. The only thing they could sell was tobacco, but after you grow tobacco for a couple of years, it destroys the soil and you need to move on, especially in that era. And there was a promising opportunity around cotton, but it turns out that the kind of cotton that grew in most of the soil there was extremely difficult to separate the seeds from the fibers. In fact, if you picked 4 pounds of cotton from the field and gave it to a slave, it would take them 10 hours to separate those 4 pounds of cotton into 3 pounds of seed and 1 pound of fibers. Basically, it's a business that couldn't scale. You couldn't even afford to own enough slaves to make a business of it. So he listened to them for a while, and he thought about how might one solve this problem, and he came up with this famous invention, which was the cotton engine. And somehow this got reduced to the cotton gin. And this was an incredible little machine that you could feed the raw cotton into, turn the crank, and it would use a series of wires to claw the fibers away from the seeds. And this little machine could process cotton at a rate that was unbelievable. It could do in minutes what it would require manually days to perform. So word quickly got out that this incredible machine had been invented, and the amount of cotton acreage that was planted literally exploded. In fact, the cotton planting exploded so quickly that Eli couldn't begin to produce machines fast enough to keep up to the demand. So what happened, as you might expect, is people began to rip off his patent. The patent laws were brand new at this time, really had just come into existence, and many people stole his design and made cotton gins just like it. And so he began to fight to defend his patent application. But none of the states were very helpful because they basically concluded that for the greater good of the economy, we should let this guy's patent get violated, because we can't afford to have so many farmers held back while one man becomes so incredibly rich with this patent. So he made some money on this machine, but he spent virtually all of it fighting in courts over the next 10 years. So 10 years later, the South was a completely different place. Cotton was king, the economy was on fire, and Eli Whitney packed up his bags and headed north, pretty disgusted with the whole outcome, because he basically had nothing to show for it. But he got up to Connecticut, where he set up shop near a mill, a water mill, and he engaged the US government in this incredible contract to produce 10,000 muskets in 2 years. Now at the time, muskets were produced manually. A single person would produce the stock, the trigger mechanism, the barrel, you name it. And therefore every musket was different. You could never swap parts from one to another because they were just different parts, basically. And there's no way you could produce 10,000 muskets in 2 years using that approach. So Eli came up with another scheme, which became even more famous, which was the standardization of parts and a repeatable, specialized production process behind it. Along the way, he invented the milling machine and a few other things that don't get as much play. But this became one of those seminal moments that defined the beginning of the first industrial revolution. A different way to produce things, a much more efficient, much more high volume, much higher quality, much lower cost type of approach. And so for the next 100 years, this carried the day, until about 100 years later, Henry Ford came along and upped the ante with the concept of a moving assembly line. And the moving assembly line really just was another level of efficiency on top of what Eli had pioneered 100 years prior. And this was recognized as the second industrial revolution, because this too brought on another massive wave of change. And this industrial revolution has basically carried on almost to the current day. You know, companies like Dell, for example, have mastered the idea of inventory management and on-demand assembly, and really been able to produce incredibly high-quality products that are configurable, at relatively low price points that, quite frankly, surprise us all some days. So, the point here being that for 200 years, we've been thinking about operational improvements as the main driver for competitive advantage. But having done this for 200 years, it's getting harder and harder to find a great big advantage in the way you do things. And I think we're probably getting to the point where this is just table stakes. It's what you need to get in the game, but being operationally efficient doesn't mean you're going to win. Just ask the cell phone manufacturers who compete against Apple. It's not good enough at all to be operationally efficient. So today, I think we could all ask, well, where can manufacturing companies turn for a truly sustainable and meaningful competitive advantage? And I would submit to you, they need to go back, metaphorically, to the cotton gin. They need to realize that the best products, in the end, do carry the day. The best products and the best services. And we need to think strategically about opportunities to create value with innovation, new products and new services. Whereas it's difficult to find a breakthrough operational efficiency these days, it's not so difficult to find breakthrough products and services. It's happening all the time. Not to say it's not challenging, but it certainly happens. And then today, I think we have a new generation of tools to help us. One could argue, as The Economist magazine did in the special April issue, that the subject which brought you all here today, which they characterize as the digitization of manufacturing, is the third industrial revolution, because there are so many new ways to do things, so many new ideas, new approaches brought on by digital technology, that you really have an incredible opportunity to go create differentiation. So let's talk about a couple of my favorite customers who have done just that. Hyundai, for example, very big PTC PLM CAD customer, becoming an ALM customer, a great success story. Today they're the fourth largest automotive OEM in the world and the fastest growing. But it wasn't always that way. In fact, when their cars first came to the United States, I think in the 90s, I remember their reputation for quality was extremely bad. And along the way, there was this man shown here in the picture, which was on the front cover of a magazine. This man is Dr. H.S. Lee, who is the now retired Chief Technology Officer at Hyundai Motors. He joined the company and he said, we need to stop buying engines from the supplier that was supplying their engines. We need to start producing our own if we want to drive up quality. Because a big part of the quality problem was the engines they were buying that they didn't really control. So this man, Dr. H.S. Lee, went out and bought himself some Pro Engineer seats and proceeded to use these digital tools to create a phenomenal engine. In fact, this engine was so good, and he was so confident about it, he was so confident he had mitigated all the traditional failure modes, that he said, this thing can run for 10 years or 100,000 miles without failing. And that led to this 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty that Hyundai started to offer on their cars. Well, it's pretty hard to say a car is poor quality when it has a 10-year warranty. And so immediately the reputation for quality dramatically improved, as did the reality behind the reputation. And this set Hyundai really on this explosive growth path, that they've been on ever since. So it's a great success story. There's another great success story that you're going to hear a lot about today, so I don't want to say too much now. But Whirlpool is an example of a big international company, 9 big brands, uses almost every type of technology that PTC produces to put really innovation at the core of their strategy. And so I've talked quite a few times here this morning about strategy, and I just want to baseline that for a minute. So there's a man out there, Dr. Michael Porter from Harvard Business School, who's considered to be the world's foremost expert on strategy. Incidentally, in a way, he's my boss because he's on the PTC board of directors as well. But this particular guy, who really is, considered the best, basically says strategy is all about choosing what activities you perform, and the essence of good strategy is choosing activities that are different than your rivals. For example, building higher quality engines or innovating around smart products or what have you. So if you think about it, who in your company is responsible for making these choices? So I created a little framework to describe the way I see this. Within a typical manufacturing company, there are 3 major organizations. And there's more in the background like the G&A and finance type organizations. But in terms of your day-to-day operations where most of your employees are, they're generally in the engineering function, the supply chain and manufacturing function, or the sales and service function. And so if you think about those 3 organizations, you could draw a line horizontally and say some people really work on decision-making, strategy. For example, if I start in sales and service, what will the customers buy? What are the requirements? And what variations could we produce that would allow our products to be sold to a given customer or into a given market segment? And then there are engineers back on the left side who are taking these requirements and saying, what is our system engineering approach? What is our mechanical, our hardware, our software approach? How would we validate that this design is going to work? And in the meantime, concurrently, the people in the supply chain and manufacturing organization are saying, which suppliers will we work with? Which suppliers, which components? What are the cost and the risk implications of those decisions? What manufacturing processes will we use? What tooling will we need? And so forth. And then back in sales and service, the service people are saying, what type of service activities will we have to do? What is the design or the engineering of those activities? What information will we need? What parts will we need? How do we respond to field issues and so forth? So I would say this is the strategic lineup. And then of course on the other side of the fence, there's a lot of operational activities. So the people on the top are basically saying, what should we do? And the people on the bottom are doing it. Now the people on the bottom, for a long time, have had a system that helps them. This is an ERP system. An ERP system optimizes within those functions, and across them, it coordinates activities as well. So an ERP system, in my mind, is an enterprise system for operational efficiency. And PTC's goal is to be the analog, if you will, the strategic system that optimizes all these important decisions within and then coordinates across these functions on the strategic side of the fence. There's a couple of quick analogies I like here to help you maybe think about the concept. One is the idea of right brain, left brain. Part of your brain is reportedly very information comes in one side, raw materials and things supplied like paper and ink enter on the sides, and physical product comes out the back end. But I would submit that, if you want the document to be good, the definition of good really is how it reads, even more so than how it's printed. In fact, the most successful, most valuable company in the world right now, Apple, doesn't even do the bottom half. They outsource it. They think it's a commodity. And their advantage is all created in the top, around the ideas, working together to get the right ideas and the right components and the right hardware and software and suppliers and so forth, and then outsource it. When they hit the print button, the file, if you will, goes over to Foxconn in China and wakes up and starts producing iPads. So I think it's a great testament to the power of being really good at the strategic side, in addition to the table stakes need to be good on the operational side. Now, if you try to do this, you see there are some challenges. It's not necessarily easy to be good at this. And if I start in the middle, on the coordination side, trying to keep everybody synchronized around what are we going to do in the first place? This selection of programs and projects that the company will fund. And then trying to figure out how to develop them globally. And thinking intelligently about product platforms so that you can have a lot of diversity as viewed by the customer, but not so much diversity as viewed by your operational people downstream. Or if you move into the hardware engineering, this complexity, for example, brought on by product diversity, turns into a real challenge in hardware development. And the idea of electromechanical design is an ever-present, ever more present type of challenge. Or if you move into software engineering, here the requirements change so fast, partly because they can. And the software is getting ever more complicated. There are about 65 computers right now on an average automobile, and 100 million lines of code. So how all that stuff works together is not simple at all anymore. If you move into the supply chain and manufacturing arena, both the supply chain complexity of global supply chains, but also the regulatory overhead of trying to make sure everything you're doing ultimately is legal or produces products that can be sold. Or in the service area, trying to figure out, with such a diverse product line, how do you create the necessary information and the necessary spare parts and so forth, so that you don't miss out on the revenue opportunity that comes with service and parts in the downstream part of the product. So there's a lot of challenges here, that can be addressed, and they're really great opportunities for transformation. So when we think about transformation at PTC, we think about it in the classic people, process, technology framework. In the area of process, understanding the changes that we're going to make, for example. So at PTC, we're 10 years into this idea we call our process landscape. But it really means we're 10 years into studying how you guys work and trying to understand what are the best practices and where are the opportunities to transform. Because some of you are really good at one thing and not so good at the other. So we sit back and collect and do our own independent research around what are the best ways to do hardware and software engineering. What are the best ways to design and optimize a supply chain and manufacturing process? What are the best ways to put in place a field organization around after-sales service? And what are the best ways to coordinate across that from a change management, configuration management, or regulatory type of view? So we think that process transformation is ultimately why we exist. Now, it's not easy, and it can't happen all at once. So we like to work with our customers typically in a phased mode, using the different pieces of technology here. So at PTC, we're now really, through organic development and acquisitions, we're in 5 separate but interconnected technology businesses. We have a system that knits together really great CAD technology with really great PLM technology, and now with our MKS ALM acquisition, really great technology for managing the software development and the system engineering processes. With our product analytics offering, and as well our Flex PLM, Windchill Flex PLM software, really great solutions for supply chain management. And then with our service lifecycle management business, a great set of solutions for managing the after-sales service lifecycle of the product and the solution as well. So this is the technology platform, and then the final piece really is governance, the people piece. So when we work with customers, this change can't all happen at once, and we need to know why we're doing it. So the first thing we try to do in an engagement is baseline the value creation opportunity. What is we're trying to create, and how can we measure it? Because at the end of the day, you're spending money with the promise of getting value. We need to track the value and prove in the end that that objective was achieved. The next thing is we need to do it over time. So we need to have a shared value, or a shared view as well, around what is the roadmap. If we're going to phase this over time, what's in the first phase, what's in the second phase, what are the timing of these phases, what are the value deliverables at each phase, and so forth. And then the third thing, it never actually goes like we expected it to, or rarely. There's always surprises. So governance really speaks to the idea of how do we deal with surprises and remain good friends as we work our way through them. And that's the important thing here. So value, roadmap, and governance really are the pillars of what we call our value-centric engagement model, which we think is the right way to work with customers in pursuit of this transformation opportunity. So let me talk about a couple of customers who really get it. Some customers that I'm really proud to be associated with because of how much success they've had with their products. If you take John Deere, for example, it's just a fabulous American company, American success story. John Deere spent 175 years, they're one of the oldest companies in the US, 175 years getting to $25 billion in revenue. And in the next 8, they want to get to $50 billion in revenue. Double the company in 8 years while raising the operating margins. It's an incredible, goal to set for oneself. It's really just unbelievable. But if you ask Deere, how are you going to do this? It really is globalization. They want to expand dramatically their business outside the US. They want to hire a much more global workforce and then have them work together in the global development of global platform-oriented products so that they can have a lot of diversity but not give up all the efficiency and scale of a platform-driven approach. So PTC's technology is really key to how Deere is going to double the company by 2018. Let's take another example of a company that we're proud to work with, Continental, which is a German-based but global automotive supplier. It's really one of the very largest automotive suppliers in the world right now. And Continental produces many types of subsystems from, it's a collection of companies that have been acquired over time and so forth. In the last decade or so, they've seen an enormous transition to smart products, much more software, much more electronics. In fact, there are far more software engineers working at Continental than there are mechanical engineers these days. So they rely on PTC to provide the transformation around systems engineering in particular to help them put in place a world-class way to design across the mechanical, electronic, and software disciplines and implement really great products that perform well for the OEMs. That's a great success story for PTC. And then another one, just to pick one that's very different, is Cabela's. Cabela's is one of my favorite companies because I sort of grew up as an outdoorsman type of guy. Cabela's is a major international outdoor retailer. And they've taken a strategic approach to optimize global development and as well streamline their global sourcing and supply chain. So you can see we're having a lot of success with customers, and our success with customers has translated into success for PTC. So PTC's business is very global, as you see in the bottom right here, and growing virtually in all parts of the globe. We've been growing in all of the industries that we participate, the verticals as we call them, and taking market share. And as a result, we've been able now for some years to continue to post double-digit on average revenue growth. And you can see that we're basically on track to nearly double our earnings from 2009 to 2012. So we're having a lot of success, but we never forget that our success fundamentally comes from our ability to help you achieve your success by creating the special concept of product and service advantage. All right, so thanks a lot. I hope you have a great time at the show here.